What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today I've got my guy here. All right. Jason Lange is going to straighten us dudes out. All right. Because we're sick of this shit. And he's going to open it up. He's going to help us out. And he's going to bring love and kindness back to all of us. Right, my brother? How's Jason Lane doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, man.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah,
So I'm just going
yeah.
to read Jason's bio real quick and then we'll jump in the pool. Good to go?
Good to go.
Let's do it. All right. Jason Lange. Jason is a men's embodiment coach, group facilitator, and evolutionary guide. He helps men drop in and wake up to deeper clarity in their life's purpose and relationships. Jason believes every man should be in a men's group for the growth and support opportunities they provide. Jason is a certified No More Mr. Nice Guy coach. I love that. We're going to talk about that shit. And has trained and studied with leaders such as John Wineland, Dr. Robert Glover, Jun Po Roshi, Tripp Lanier, and Ken Wilber. So right on, right on. Just thank you so much for joining us on the What If You Could podcast.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here, Gary. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. So we're the What If You Could podcast, bro. So I have to ask my one question out the gate, and basically it's just, what if you could? Have you had a what if you could moment or what if you could thought? I mean, what's your what if you could?
Yeah, well, the what if I could, that really came to me that in a lot of ways my work is about is for us men. So, as men, what if we could, so I'm going to use the we in this instance, have balls and heart. So, not have to just have either or, right? Not have to just be a macho jerk and not have to just be a pushover, nice guy, overly sensitive, whatever that might be. But what if we could have both? And what might that do both for our individual lives and for the planet right now, frankly, right? And that for too long, I think there's kind of been this schism between the two, and it's left a lot of men really lost, really confused, and with no clear path forward of to be blunt, like, what the fuck are we supposed to be? How are we supposed to show up? Right? How do we um, thrive in this world and bring thriving to others? So, that's something that more and more, a lot of my work's just oriented around of, yeah, what if we could do both? And it's a path I've been on myself, right? And usually what I find in the work I do with a lot of men is we tend to kind of lean to one side of the spectrum by default. So some guys are just all about, me, push, go, raw. Other guys are a lot more like, no, I don't want to be that, and careful and safe and sensitive. And um, I'm like a little bit more on the more careful, safe, sensitive side. And part of my work's been, bring a little bit more fire in my life, bring a little bit more boundary, bring a little more clarity about who I am and what I want and what I see in the world. And that's been my journey. And then I support men in every place in between, so to speak.
Where did let's jump into that. Have balls and have heart. I mean, what does that mean nowadays to have balls and to have heart? I mean, what does that even what do we take from that? You know what I mean? I mean, we could go so many places with that, but what's your take on that? To have balls and have heart.
Yeah, when I say balls, what I mean is a deep and sustained connection to ourself, including our body and our impulses, our desires, what we want, and yes, our sexuality as men. And it's our capacity to set boundaries, to be firm, to not be afraid of engaging with conflict in a sense, but not necessarily causing conflict, right? So balls often has to do with like a sense of rootedness and power and like, I'm here, right? And you can't push me around and you can't push them around, right? So there's this like solidness to our power. For a lot of us guys, it's also deeply interwoven with our life force and our creativity. You know, balls literally has to do with our sexuality and our sexual life force. And for a lot of men, it's a very confusing time when it comes to what are we supposed to do with that energy because we've lived through, most of human history in a lot of ways of seeing what happens when men use that without regard to others, abusing their sexuality, taking from the feminine and others and kids, frankly. But and then now, a lot of men I work with are just completely under-equipped to deal with the absolute flood to our nervous systems of the easy availability of sexual content, right? Whether that's online pornography, whether that's social media, whether that's just what's frankly, the hypersexualization of our kind of commercial culture that just everything from, teenage Disney shows on up, it's like things are hypersexualized. And a lot of us men just, we don't have antibodies to like, what do I do with this, right? This onslaught of energy that hits my nervous system. And so a lot of us men are just learning, how do I be right with my sexuality? How do I be right with my power in the world? That's kind of the balls part. And how do I be present in my body is the other thing I'd probably share there, something that a lot of us men just are not taught how to do. And then the hard part is, okay, how do I feel? What is my capacity to feel and be connected to myself, those who I'm in relationship with, and frankly, the context, the environment that I'm a part of. Whether that's your family, community, culture, or just the earth itself. Um, and for a lot of us men, we've been taught you can be one or the other and not both at the same time. And, traditional masculine culture has been heavy on the kind of balls, patriarchy. I'm here in the States, the rugged individualist cowboy, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, Marlboro man, like be tough, right? And generally, there's certainly positive qualities in there, but generally what that means, what most men have been taught tough means, is disconnect from your body and disconnect from your heart and keep going, whatever that is, right? And turns out, lo and behold, that has some pretty severe consequences for us as men long term in terms of our emotional, physical, and frankly, spiritual health in some pretty big ways.
Yeah. You think back to just our DNA as people, right? I mean, you go back to the cavemen. Dude went out, caught the food, brought it back. The wife was there taking care of the kids, taking care of the cave. Dudes killed shit, ate, had sex. That's what dudes did, right? I mean, women had babies, took care of the kids, took care of their husband, made sure the cave was clean when he went out and killed shit and brought it back. It was pretty simple, pretty basic, right? Our DNA. And it stayed that way for millennia, right? So today, like you said, it's like bizarre. I mean, dudes can have a period. You could stuff a ketchup lollipop up your ass and have a period, and we don't know what we're supposed to be. It's it's wild, right? But on the other side of that, the women too. I mean, it's really tough on the women. I mean, they got the women's lib stuff. Go out and work, burn your bra, screw the dudes, go make money, pay your taxes, break up the family. We're all kind of screwed up, aren't we? I mean, it's tough for both sides.
We're learning totally. We're learning, and I like to look at that story through the lens of liberation, which has positive and challenging components. What I mean by that is, so traditionally, the roles we were expected to do in life were tied to our biology, right? Only a woman can breastfeed, so she's going to take care of the kids. Only a man can do certain things with his body in terms of his strength and his capacity to move and run and whatnot. So he did certain things. And so we were kind of relegated to those roles for a long time. Starting in the, 50s, 60s, and 70s, we started to liberate from that, meaning, oh shit, we're not constrained by our biology anymore, right? So the kind of forefront of that was the feminist movement of, hey, fucking women, you're allowed to be human beings that exist beyond just being a mother or being a caregiver in the family. You can have your own wants, desires, bank account, goals, purpose, agency in the world, right? And that's a good thing in my book. Simultaneously, it was right around then, though a little slower behind. I would say this is part of what's going on right now. The men started to be liberated as well into, oh shit, we're allowed to feel. Literally, we're allowed to feel and have emotions. With technology, we've been liberated in different ways of, I'm a father of two and I'm heavily involved in raising my kids. I give them bottles. I'm up with them all the time. I do things that wouldn't have been possible, you know, 200, 300 years ago before refrigeration and whatnot. So our roles are kind of changing, right? We're liberated. So it's no longer just because you were born this way, you have to be this way. And that has a lot of positives with it. And it leaves us like, well, what do we do then? Right? Because a lot of men I know and a lot of couples I know then sometimes struggle with part of the reversal we've seen in the culture is, I would say, women got out into the workforce, and then the men's movement is that I'm kind of part of wasn't really, there was kind of like a hippie burst in the 60s and 70s of kind of free love and growing your hair out and whatnot. That started that, but it didn't really kind of take root until about the 90s when Robert Bly and some other men's work leaders started saying, hey, men need spaces to connect as men. And in fact, a lot of what women want from us, the sense of interiority, feeling, emotion, whatnot, the best place for us to first bring that online is with other men. And when we're in that context, we can access parts of ourselves that then make us more available in our, if we're in a traditional hetero relationship or whatever that might be. And this just keeps happening. So we keep getting liberated and liberated from all kinds of things, meaning, structures and gender fluidity. All this stuff is just getting more and more spacious in terms of, you don't have to be shit. But the thing becomes that, well, then what do you choose to be? And then what does that mean for the type of relationship you want to be in? And so a lot of men I work with, yeah, they deal with oftentimes their woman has a kick-ass job, is out maybe working 60, 70 hours a week, makes more money than them, is very on purpose, and they're a little more lost. They're like, yeah, I kind of have a job. I don't know really what I'm doing yet. And that reverses what we kind of call polarity of just the how these energies interact. And let me be super clear here. I'm going to use some pretty traditional terms, but you don't have to use these. In the work I do, we do tend to talk about masculine and feminine as two poles of energy that everybody has, no matter what sexual type of body you were born into. So as a guy, I have a feminine side. Every woman has a masculine side. If you don't like those labels, you don't have to use those labels, right? Some people, there's so much baggage with them. Some people are just like, yeah, fuck that. Um, some people call it alpha and omega. I sometimes call it feeling and perspective. In the East, you could label it kind of yin and yang. There's so many manifestations of this general kind of polarized dynamic that when they're different, it creates a certain energy in a relationship, right? It's like magnets. When each person's playing a different part, creates attraction. And it's like, ooh, we want to be together. When they're the same, best case scenario, they're neutral. Worst case scenario, it's kind of like, ugh, repulsion. And that's what a lot of couples are having to deal with right now is they get depolarized because yeah, a lot of us men are being asked to bring online our interiority, our sense of feeling, um, our creativity. And a lot of women have been moving out in the workforce and that gets changed, it gets flipped. And then there's like, well, how do we, this doesn't feel good, right? She's not happy. I'm not happy. What's going on here? But, you know, these same dynamics, frankly, happen in any kind of gender dynamic or couple. Um, but so what we're learning is all that said, as we get liberated from these things, we have to be more conscious about how we're going to bring them into relationship. So if I want to create attraction with my partner, I have to know what energy are they playing with right now and what energy am I playing with right now. That's it. And long term, that has to become a practice, right? Whether you're in a traditional relationship or not. You know, most people call it the honeymoon phase, but you know, usually a year and a half in, the hormones wear off, the attachment wounding comes up, and suddenly we're like, I'm not attracted to my partner. I'm annoyed by my partner. I'm fighting my partner. What's going on here? This must not be the one, right? This must not be the one because I don't feel that way anymore. And I see her over there, and oh, I think, man, it'd be great with her. Uh, but frankly, a lot of what's happening there is we're having to do some inner healing work, and then we haven't learned the tools for how to keep attraction alive long term. So, long and short of it is, yeah, it's a confusing time out there for a lot of people, and for men, I think in particular, because mostly what we've been inundated with for the last, 20, 30, 40 years are the examples of masculinity in men that were pathological. So that were causing harm in the world, whether it's the Me Too movement, whether it was people using or abusing their power. There's so many examples, right? You and I were talking a bit before this that have unfortunately been labeled, toxic masculinity. It's just kind of, oh, that's toxic masculinity. The masculinity itself is toxic. I'm definitely not a believer in that. In that toxic means it's no good and it's never going to be good and there's no way to redeem it. And I don't believe there's toxic femininity either. I believe in pathological masculinity or femininity, meaning just some part of us has grown wrong, right? It's just like something's not going right, so we've grown in the wrong direction a bit. And that can be addressed and made more healthy. And for a lot of us guys, it is in this process of learning. We have to be able to be in touch with our bodies, our power, but we have to remain open, sensitive, and relational, meaning if I take action in my life, if I use my power in some capacity, what's the impact it has on other people? Many, many men for a very long time were totally disconnected from that. And that causes so much harm in the world. But the answer to that is not for us to totally disconnect and get rid of our power as men, because that doesn't do anyone any good in this world. Because frankly, what it's kind of done in some areas of the world right now is it's left women to try to fend for things themselves. Like, fuck, we got to keep this planet alive. I argue right now what we need more of is healthy masculinity to meet healthy femininity and come in and say, hey, let's work on this together. We have some skills and capacities we're particularly good at for those of us that hold the masculine, just like the feminine has incredible skills and capacity they're good at. And together we can be this, amazing team, so to speak. But
Why do you
yeah, it's one
think
of the great.
what
Go
why
ahead.
do you think it's so why do you think it's so I mean I don't want to 100% black and white the issue, but I mean on generally why do you think it's so much easier for women to be in a women's group, have women's friends, talk about real shit, not just like, hey, dude, you see the
Yeah,
game and you see that hot chick and shit like that,
sure.
where women will actually connect and talk about their feelings and stuff. And for some reason, guys still struggle with that. It's just not a dude thing, right?
So totally. Some of that, I mean, there's a little bit of basis in just biology or in hormone profiles, Um, traditionally, like oxytocin, is going to be a little bit more relationally focused. And, testosterone is a little bit less relationally focused. It's a little bit more competitive in a sense. So there's a piece of that, but that's not all of it, because then we layer in all this cultural stuff that we're taught. And I see this all the time with guys. And it's the story I often tell now of pretty much from a young age. Most people here have maybe seen it or witnessed it or experienced it. You see how little boys are parented, right? And little boys often fall down, hurt their knee, whatever. Stop crying. You're okay. Get up. Be tough, right? There's this like, don't be emotional because emotion is weak. That's in a lot of ways, it's a loaded term, but that's kind of what the patriarchy is about. Emotion is weak. Feeling is weak. So a lot of us as men start to get that from a young age. And then just the way, kind of modern schooling has played out, we get put into a school system that for all kinds of reasons, none of them are really positive, traditionally has been a lot of female teachers. So we have female teachers teaching young boys. And then the way that system works is sit still and don't move. And the way biology works for most young kids, particularly young boys, is no, we got to move our bodies to learn. We have a lot of energy and actually touching things and breaking things and running around. That's how we engage with our environment. But so often at home in the family, we have an emotion. We're being told, no, be tough. Be a tough boy. Don't be weak. Sometimes it's out of malice. Sometimes it's out of I don't want you to get bullied. A parent is like trying to prepare their kid for you got to be tough. Then we get to school and they're telling us, don't move, sit still. Which both of these things, what they're teaching young boys are whatever is happening in your body, ignore it, override it with your head. That's it, right? Whatever's happening in your body, override it with your head. And in the work I do, I consider emotionality itself, always starts as sensations in our bodies. So when we're teaching young boys to ignore their bodies, we then quickly teach them to ignore their emotions. And then we get to that kind of middle school locker room. Some boys' bodies are changing, some aren't. Things get kind of hyper competitive. You don't want to show any weakness lest you get bullied or beat or made fun of or excommunicated from a group. And so that culture kind of persists. And then we get out into the world, and for a lot of men, again, this is changing, but for a lot of men, we are rewarded for working hard. Oh, yeah, he works 80 hours a week. He's a really hard worker. Turns out he's destroying his body and his marriage is falling apart and he hasn't seen his kids in 2 weeks, but he's a hard worker, so doing great for the company. Um, and we often take physically demanding jobs or often very uh, dangerous jobs in terms of toxicity or pollution or whatever that might be. Men's bodies, for all kinds of reasons, some of which are biological in just, the nature of sperm and eggs. One man can impregnate many women. The other direction doesn't happen. So men's bodies traditionally have been a little more disposable, right? So let's send the men off to war because if we lose half of them, it's okay. Our town can recover. You lose 90% of the women. No, that's not going to happen. Um, Nearly the same pace. But point being, we're taught, we're actually taught out of our bodies. We are encouraged to get out of our bodies as men. And this causes all kinds of problems then. Because then for a lot of men, what starts to happen is we start to feel things in our body. Nobody has taught us what they are, let alone what to do with them. So, what do most men do when they start to feel things that are uncomfortable? They turn to something outside themselves to remove that discomfort, whether it's social media, porn, alcohol, weed, overworking, TV, you name it. It's one of the go to things for men. And then we do it often in isolation because, oh, not only is it bad that I'm feeling sad or mad about my work, but oh my God, I cannot let anyone know that because that would just be the worst. And I certainly can't ask for help and go to a counselor or therapist because that's only for really messed up people. This is all the garbage that men are fed. And a lot of us just come up in this culture of men are your competition. And a big part of my mission and the work I do with men's groups is no, the right men are your allies.
And the sad part of that is a lot of times men don't even turn to their partner. because they don't want to feel weak in front of their partner, when in fact that is the person you should be turning to, besides the men's group and yes, other men. But I mean, your partner is supposed to be your partner. And if you can't even turn to them because you're feared to sound weak to your wife, or that you're not, not supposed to share these emotions, then that really is hurtful for the family, for the whole unit, for the marriage and stuff. You touched on a bunch of stuff there. Touched on social media, which I was going to ask. I know social media could be pretty dangerous too, but what about male role models? I mean, you talking about when we were younger and things like that, and our family units kind of messed up. Our we have female teachers, which is cool. The principal, authority figures are women early in our life and stuff like that. Where are the role models for men now?
This is the great question of our time. There aren't many. And this is, again, one of the really painful things, in that, again, some of this was just due to technology and culture shifts, right? Robert Bly talks a lot about this a lot in some of his early writings. But that, when the Industrial Revolution happened, one of the big shifts that happened was before that, you know, in a lot of tribal cultures and traditions, men, the boys would boys and girls would kind of be together and everyone would just be playing and being raised. And then, between like 8 and 12 at some point, there would be a shift where the boys would kind of be taken by the older men, sometimes their father, to, okay, you got to start coming to work with me now. You're going to shadow me in my trade or my thing or whatever that might be. And there were often traditionally rites of passage, and still are in many cultures around the world. That's like, hey, your time of being a boy is done, and it's time for you to step into being a man. And what that really meant was you're now going to spend more time with the adult men, being taught the ways of our village culture, workplace, whatever that is. When the Industrial Revolution hit, what happened? Dads started going off to the factory. They were gone all day. So the boys were just left behind. And that transmission stopped for a lot of men and young boys. Sports and, the Cub Scouts and some things kind of like held that for a little while, but a lot of that has kind of dissolved. And so a lot of boys don't get to spend time around men. Just that simple. They do not get to spend time around men. And that's the main way we get the transmission of what being an adult man is supposed to be. It's like, this is their, wow, I can feel their nervous system. I see how they deal with frustration. I see how they deal with an angry client. I see how they deal with the weather being bad. That teaches us something, right? That all kind of got shattered in a lot of ways. And then, yeah, we used to, a lot of our archetypes for, healthy masculinity were kind of more this macho Marlboro man, John Wayne kind of thing that held for a little while. But the problem with a lot of those role models now is they're not sophisticated enough to be meaningful in the culture we live in now, where those men weren't raising their kids. They were not having emotional conversations with their wives. They were, this is what we're doing. And she was just expected to follow, and the kids were just expected to follow. None of that shit works anymore. It doesn't fly anymore. Doesn't mean we can't lead our families, but we need more complex role modeling here. And that's what there's just not a lot of, right? There's just not a lot of it in mainstream media, in culture at all. And it's pretty rare, right? When we ask men, like, what are positive, integrated representations of masculinity do you see out in the world right now? A lot of people don't have a tremendous amount of things they can name. And that, again, leaves us in a vacuum. And that's one of the most amazing things I've seen take place in the men's work world that I'm in men's groups, is suddenly we get hooked back into that. And part of, my personal journey of why I'm so passionate about this stuff is, I was 26 when I started working with a mentor in a men's group. And I mean, it sounds so ridiculous, but I'm like watching this man facilitate. He was probably in his late 50s or 60s at the time. Saw him interact with his wife a little bit, saw how he was interacting with the other men. And my felt body experience was, oh shit, that's what I want to be when I grow up. Kind of like you would say, like a 3-year-old, I want to be a fireman. But it wasn't about what he was doing, it was about how he was being. I got this deep transmission of his presence. He was super grounded. He was very much in contact with whoever he was talking with. He was deeply aware of himself, of people, of the environment. He modeled healthy anger. He modeled healthy shame. He didn't get rattled by things. He didn't get reactive to things. And I was like, whatever that is, that's what I want. Like, that's what I want to be when I grew up. Like, how did you do that? What did you do? And that kind of led me on a trajectory. And I see this all the time in men's groups as I take guys in, sometimes men who have never been around men in any kind of meaningful way or didn't trust them or didn't feel safe around them. And, a man will bring some piece of work forward, or, the spectrum I often see that just blows guys' minds is either a man brings forward a tremendous amount of anger or rage about something in their lives, but they do it in a way that they can feel completely fucking safe to be around. There's no like, oh my God, what's this guy? But it's like, wow, yeah, he's pissed, and I feel totally safe. I trust him. He's not going to hurt me. He's not going to hurt people. That's mind blowing to many men that that's a possibility. Or a man will often go deeply into some piece of fear or grief, like, and just be pouring through tears. Yet his chin will be held high. He won't be collapsed. And men will have the experience of, fuck, he is strong. I trust this man even more. Not because he doesn't cry, but because he does cry. He's not afraid of that shit. And that's, one of the things I often say to guys is like, who's more afraid? The man who's unwilling to feel his emotions, or the man that just goes right into them, doesn't collapse, doesn't posture, but knows how to be with them. And that transmission of, oh, there's another way to be here, right? There's another way to be here. I can be in my power and I can be feeling. It's another way to think about the heart and the balls thing. Um, Wakes guys up and shows them, oh, there's nobody told me. So many guys are just like, nobody showed me or told me that something else was possible. I've been sitting my whole life holding all this shit inside, suffering, self medicating, often depressed or with no energy, feeling totally alone. And nobody even told me something like this was possible. And then suddenly, like, all these preconceived notions just go out the door. And the best part of it, for me, Gary, is seeing men come alive. Like, literally just seeing life force come back into their body of, I'm alive, I'm feeling, I'm here. And it's just so inspiring.
That's awesome. Yeah, that pressure valve you're talking about. Would you rather have the dude who can just decompress, be real, express those feelings, or the dude who's holding that shit in? And it's like, who are you gonna trust? That dude who's just holding
Yeah.
that in, he's gonna blow, man. Something's gonna go sideways with that cat. And this guy's just like, he's level. I mean, yeah, you've got emotions, but you're releasing that pressure valve. You're not holding this shit in, and you're just as your soul starts to heal, you can start feel that person differently. Just their energy's
Yeah.
different. The way they hold themselves is different. M- Men still have to have a purpose, right? I mean, we still have to have a purpose. All people still need to have a purpose. Um, where do you think on that, since we touched about it a little bit, with the social media? I mean, where do you think? It just seems like everything's time 10, it just seems like warp speed from, yeah, we were kind of going sideways and the pendulum was swinging, but now the fucking pendulum's just like swinging around like a clock. I mean, don't you see things have sped up as far as men's getting their ass kicked?
Yeah, I think what I'll focus mostly on is, yeah, men are, in so much pain. And social media is really interesting because it intensifies for all people, the, things like this, certain online communities, which tend to be focused around niche similarities or likes or very special things, are like the positive version. But generalized social media tends to um, really be destructive to people's psyches because it's kind of like, I call it sugar. It's like sugar. It's like, I think I'm getting a lot of connection. I'm connected to all these people, right? And it's like, no, it's not actual nutrition to be scrolling a social media feed or occasionally liking someone's post or commenting on it. It's not actually relational. in a felt body way. Um, so a lot of men are getting the empty calories of that. And then it just intensifies, what is such poison to so many men, which is comparison. Oh, and it, it is in some ways this simple, but it's like he's got bigger dick than me. So I got to feel bad about myself, right? And that plays out in all kinds of ways. The size of the truck, the beauty of the girlfriend, how his six-pack abs, where he's going on vacation. So for most men, they look at social media and they feel worse about themselves. Oh, everyone out there has a good life and has figured it out, and I don't. And oh, they have such good lives. I can't talk to them about that, right? They'd never understand how much I'm suffering. The reality is most men are suffering inside, right? Many,
Yeah.
many men are suffering inside. And when you
Man.
get past all that shit and you get men in the same room and they start revealing, it's like, oh, yeah, everybody has some painful story they're carrying. Everybody has a challenge in their lives. Um, and then you just get, yeah, these kind of generalized messages that, I used to live in LA and was part of Hollywood for a little while, and it didn't help that the kind of 90s 2000s, a lot of the comedy shows, about the bumbling man, the oaf father, he's just so clueless. Kind of these stories really started to kind
Yeah.
of accumulate, I think, for a lot of men, and then um, you know. Honest truth is, for a lot of women, they've had pretty damaging experiences with a lot of men. Just a few men who are disconnected can cause a lot of harm in the world and impact a lot of people. And then those stories get highlighted. And a lot of the other stories about just solid guys who are doing the best they can to take care of their families, that doesn't make for engaging social media content. Like, yeah, I came home early from work so I could take my kid to his game. Like, that doesn't go viral, right, in any capacity. So the it distorts
Yeah.
the narrative, I think, in a lot of ways. And that when you couple that with a lot of men just aren't given the tools for how to be relational, men, I think, are suffering even more from the changes in our culture of this hyper social media, technology, work from home. What I kind of call it here in America is this hyper focus on privatization and being an individual. The dream is to have your own car and own house away from everybody so you never have to see anyone. That's kind of the American dream, right?
Yeah.
Which means you're disconnected. You're not actually part of anything. And um, there's a lot of forces that have pushed us to that. I mean, right, in the age of Amazon, you can live from home and never leave your house. Honestly, you can get food, groceries, your basic needs met. You can be connecting with people virtually. And that, I think, hits men the hardest because, for whatever reason, cultural, biological, a lot of women do just have a little bit more of an innate capacity to, whether it was COVID or something else, they're still in contact with friends, sharing about their life and what's hard through text message. I see my wife doing it all the time, right? It's like her phone's always going off because she's just relating. And a lot of men I worked with, particularly during, COVID and lockdowns, if they weren't in a call with me or one of my groups, they weren't talking to anyone. They were just alone in a room, suffering.
It's
And
scary how quickly you can go 3 or 4 days without talking to anyone. It's really
yes,
bizarre. And
so
that
true.
that emotion you're talking about and the pain and stuff. I started a podcast with a friend of mine. He lost his wife to cancer. I lost my wife to cancer. We were
Oh,
talking all the time, and I said, "Dude, we should get this out to people somehow." And then my buddy goes, "We'll try a podcast." Like, sure, why not? So he and I started this thing called Grief Pie. Two guys
yeah.
sharing grief one bite at a time, right? And it was so heavy that people were like, dude, I can't watch that shit anymore. Seriously, you guys bring it way too hard. And I'm like, what? We're just sharing, we're crying, we're like talking about our feelings and really going there. And the crazy thing is we'd have women reaching out all the time.
Yeah.
We'd have no dudes reaching out. And then the occasional guy, like behind the scenes, would text me, like, "Hey, man, I'm really hurting. Can I talk to you about something?" I'm like, "Yeah, but come on, come on,
Yeah.
talk with us. Go on the site, share your shit." Because that was our whole focus is getting men to come on and share. couldn't do it, right? But the chicks were like, yeah, let me come on. I tell you, I lost my husband, or I lost my kid, or I lost my dog, or a lot, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, this is guys trying to get guys out here to share. And we
Yeah.
finally just gave it up. Well, we had to give it up because he crashed and burned. But I mean, but yeah, it's just a really tough thing, and I think this is why what you're doing is so awesome. So explain me men's groups. Explain me what you're doing with the workshops and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a little piece of context first in that, again, how most of us men relate by default is through, I didn't come up with this, but we call it triangulation. So me
Call it
and
what?
you, we call it triangulation.
Triangulation. Okay.
So how we relate is me and you get a sense of connection from each other by focusing our attention on a third thing, a sporting game, an activity, talking about politics, fixing a car. So we spend time together, but we're not actually looking at each other often. You can really think about it, right? Our
Oh
attention
yeah,
is on poker game.
100%.
We're looking at the cards,
Yeah.
uh, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when that's all there is, countless examples. Many men may be listening. Yeah, I went out with my buddies and I came home and I felt lonely, right? Spent the whole weekend at a bachelor party and I felt lonely the whole time because we weren't actually talking to each other about what's happening inside of us. So a men's group in a lot of ways is just shifting the orientation to this. We're going to put our attention on each other and what's going on for you in your life right now. Where are you in pain? What hurts? What's hard? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to be going? What's in the way? Is the most general definition of a men's group I could really share in some sense. It's a group of men who get together with intention of getting real about what's going on in their lives and opening up about it to get support. And sometimes, yes, to get challenge and accountability, to be held accountable to what we want to move towards. And kind of like meditation, there's infinite manifestations. Well, what kind of meditation do you do? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? There's a lot of ways men's groups can play out, but a lot of it just depends on that, just putting our attention on each other in our lives and slowing down. And the best groups often mix a little bit of accountability, so tracking, what are we moving towards in life, and then a lot of what I call like slowing each other down to actually feel what's happening in our bodies. It sounds so simple, but so easy for guys to just report on life. Oh, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and then this happened, and it really sucked, and this happened. Much rarer for men. This happened, and I'm feeling this. I'm actually, yeah, I'm feeling so sad. I can feel it right here in my chest. Or, oh my God, I just feel so much rage in my belly with how my boss talked to me. Whatever that might be. But a lot of times, what we're doing in a men's group is we're guiding each other deeper into our bodies and our felt body experience of what's already happening out there. We're just actually getting more in contact with ourselves and life, getting more in our bodies, more in our hearts, and more clear about what we're feeling and what we're wanting. And then usually, yeah, there's this orientation of a good group meets over time. So we get to track, what's going on in each other's lives and our relationships. And, just the beauty of interpersonal work is oftentimes other people can see our shit before we can. And most men I know might not admit it, but most men I know are actually deeply longing for people to call them forward, to not let them get away with their bullshit, to not be lazy, to not be mean. And just what I mean by that is, it's the spinach in the teeth moment. To have someone that loves us and trusts us enough to say, hey man, you got a big fucking piece of spinach in your teeth and you're about to walk out on stage. And then there's little discomfort of, oh yeah, that plays out in life in a lot of ways. And a lot of men don't have anyone to share that stuff with them. And so they'll keep repeating the same patterns in their relationships or in their jobs. And no one's just sitting them down to say, hey, man, you've been talking about this for 6 months and it's not shifting and you're in pain. So like, what's going on here? Because here's what I see. You've been bitching about your job for 6 months now, and you've been saying you talk to your boss, and you haven't. And that, I just see you in a lot of pain. So like, what has to happen here? And then there's like oh man, yeah, you see me, like that is important to me, and I need help. And then those men can help us, have that conversation or whatever that might be. So, that's some like high level orientation of, men's group in a way. The last way I'll just kind of share this is it used to be for a lot of men, in the kind of traditional days, we would bond and discover who we are by going out and doing hard shit in the world together, building something, yeah, going to war, hunting, you name it. And we'd come back bonded. A lot of men don't have to do that anymore. What's shifting is, there's not a lot of like unknown territory on the earth anymore. There's no more frontier, so to speak. But there is an internal frontier of what does it mean if we gather together as men and we go into the dark, scary places that sometimes we've been avoiding feeling our whole lives, whether that's guilt, shame, anger, grief, you name it, fear. And what I see when I lead groups through that, they come out so bonded. Like, like literally, it's like, wow, we are blood brothers for life now because I saw you do something really hard. You went there, right? You felt that thing you had never felt before. You admitted that thing, you revealed that thing, whatever that might be. And it's incredible. It creates these like super tight bonds between men that then create an incredible amount of resiliency for guys back in life. And a man in my life gave me this great little rhyming phrase of, community is immunity. When we
Mm.
have deep connection, particularly I would argue with other men in our life, we're actually more resilient to the stresses of life. Um, the other thing where a lot of guys get into trouble is because of all this stuff. Yeah, our intimate partner is our only place we sometimes feel safe sharing our stress or emotion with. And lo and behold, that puts a ton of pressure on that relationship, right? When we get into a group, it's like we're moving from a single circuit to a parallel circuit. We're okay, now there's other places that my pain can be held so my partner doesn't have to hold all of it. And it tends to just open things up and things move and process a lot faster.
And it's men are men and women are women. So as much as you love your wife or your spouse, your partner, or whatever, it's still there's still that divide of sometimes the chicks can just talk to a chick differently, and a dude can talk to a dude differently. It reminds
Yep.
me I've had a lot of friends who were professional athletes, or really successful college athletes, and there's something about that team. They're on that team, they're with a group of dudes, they've got
Yes.
one mission, they've got one purpose, they're ass slapping, they're hugging, they're like, they can share shit, they've got one mission, and they're tight, right? And then when that's over, they don't really have that. They don't have this group of dudes that like all have their back. Like you're saying, and I know a lot of vets that you go,
Yes.
why do you keep fucking
Huge.
going back? Are you nuts? Why do you keep going back to that shit? But that's where they feel their family is. Those dudes get it. Those guys know the PTSD. Those guys know the struggle. Those guys know what it's like to try to stand up and be a warrior, and other people just don't get it. And so
Yep.
they miss that. They miss that connection. And what you're offering is to say, hey, you don't have to go to war. You don't have to be a professional athlete to get that connection, right? We can do that here by just being in the normal world.
It's a great pointing out because I've noticed that too. And, for some men, it's why their lives peak in high school, because they were part of a sporting team and they always talk about that. What it's really about, it's not that that was so great, is, the thing a lot of men are just dying to feel is belonging and purpose. So I belong to something and there's a purpose in me being part of that group or collective. Sporting teams, you definitely feel that, right? Wow, if I don't show up for this practice, so and so is not going to get to practice. Like it matters that I'm here and I belong to this team. Same thing for vets. Oh my God, all my brothers are going back over there. They might get hurt if I'm not there to help protect them and catch their back, watch their back, right? You get belonging and purpose out of that. And that's something that a lot of men in this moment are totally feeling an absence of. And so a men's group is kind of like a third space where that can start to matter. And, one of the ways it often blows guys' minds in the work I do is that belonging and purpose of what I see as like a shift in leadership in men and men's groups is being willing to go first. It's totally crazy. But it's this thing of, oh, I don't want to burden men with all this shit I'm going through and how hard it is because they're not going to like it if I cry or they're going to think I'm complaining. And at least in the groups I lead, every time this happens, every time a man comes forward, steps into his vulnerability, his truth, his rawness, his realness, it actually opens the door to other men and they feel more comfortable doing it and they're always fucking grateful. They're like, thank you for sharing that. Like, I didn't know I could, but you just inspired me. Now I'm going to share this. And it starts this domino effect where every man's willingness to be there in the group, sharing their realness, actually serves the other men. And it starts to create this sense of I belong here and there's a purpose here. There's a purpose to me connecting to my pain here. Because sometimes me connecting to my pain relieves one of my brothers from his because he realizes, oh shit, I'm not alone. I thought I was the only one grieving my spouse, right? No, you and your buddy, you got to be in that together. And so much of this emotional content, we are not meant to feel alone, right? In so many traditional cultures, you didn't grieve alone, you grieved in community. It's how we're like wired to actually be in this relational space and move through these things together. And as all that was kind of shoved underground in our kind of hyper suburban car, private nuclear family, all the shit that was just invented literally in the last 80 years, they just made it up, right? They just made this stuff up. Never existed before. Um, we're having to deal with a lot of the repercussions of that as men and as a culture and having to kind of find our way back to wait, there's actually some important things about being part of a collective, of a community, about having relationships that are meaningful. And frankly, just sitting in front of someone and making eye contact can do more for our nervous system than all the shit they sell us on Instagram.
Yeah. Do you guys talk about or do you get into it all? Just kind of what's going on with, you know, the mental part. Obviously, you guys are going through with what you're covering, the relationships and the social media and the giving and the opening up and stuff. But you guys talk about what's going on with our health, with our diet. The testosterone levels are like at zero for a lot of these youngsters coming up. They've just got no self-esteem. Their body's just gone to shit because of poison they're putting into themselves. And there's no testosterone, so they're struggling with that. I mean, do you work with that at all a little bit? Kind of walk people through that?
Yeah, these themes definitely come up. I was actually talking to a woman who she works with men around sexual dysfunction, and she was talking about the biggest shift she's seen in her career over the last 20 years is guys coming in for ED used to be older men who had physiological problems. So things do change as we age, right? There's just like a vascular difference. But
Yeah.
one of the biggest shifts she saw is more and more men coming in their 20s. There's nothing wrong with their body, but they couldn't get an erection and like what's going on with that. And that's a lot of where this kind of cultural and yeah, some testosterone level stuff all comes into play. And it all fuses together, right? In terms of we're less in our bodies, we're more on computers. Um, we've been fed this kind of carb heavy processed food TV dinner. I'm a little younger than you. I think I grew up in the 80s and it was like I was eating a box of sugary cereal a day. Like that's this was Little Debbie preservative food. Like this is the crap I was raised on, and I had like horrible acne and weight problems. It's like no wonder, just not it wasn't normal in a sense. And there's some rebound of that happening that I think we are having to kind of come to terms with culturally of environmental toxins, diet problems, and just no one teaches us this stuff. And, you know, not to be too ideological, but we live in a pretty hyper capitalist culture. So things like Instagram, they're always, and I see it and I have to deal with this. And how do I get men to come to me and whatnot? It's always the quick fix culture. Here's the 5 things you need to do to da 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 forever. And it's like, no, actually, change, it takes work. It's hard. It's hard to live a healthy body. It's simple concepts, but it takes discipline. I heard this great reframe I was working in a men's program of my own. I was getting some support recently, and a guy was, or just blew my mind. It's like discipline is giving yourself what you really want, like what you really want. So when you're really disciplined with something, it's like, yeah, what I really want is to be in a body that has enough energy and mobility that I can play with my kids. That's what I really want. I don't really want the ice cream sandwich, right? Um, but a lot of that, again, has kind of been wiped away. So a lot of men are physically just feeling terrible. And then um, again, I would say this kind of like American, like work hard culture. So many guys I work with, man, are just fucking burnt out. Never taken a vacation in their whole lives. I was working with one guy last summer, moved to the US maybe 30 years ago. For the first time, he asked for a vacation to go back home and spent 2 weeks in the summer, like with all the people he grew up with. And he had just never asked because I always got to be working harder. I always got to be earning. He just never thought about it. Or, I've worked with another guy who, badass CEO, running companies for 25, 30 years. One morning, he couldn't get out of bed. And he was just in bed for 3 months because his body was just like, nope, you're done. You're done. We can't do this anymore. There was nothing left in this tank. You have charged this credit card. And so his system just knocked him down. You know, Autoimmune issues show up for all kinds of guys in terms of digestive stuff, joint stuff, back stuff, heart problems. Like these things catch up into us. And a lot of times they're because we're just pushing ourselves too hard because lo and behold, nobody taught us to be connected to our bodies to feel, oh, wait, actually, I'm past my limit. I got to get some sleep. I got to take some time off. I got to shift down into rest and digest. You know, the the we're kind of encouraged to pretend like every season is summer. It's just like, no, always be going and building and out there and doing it. And it's just unsustainable. And it really wrecks men. I mean, I just see guys' bodies are wrecked. And then they're depressed and they have no energy and they wonder why. And it's like, well, what are you eating? How much are you sleeping? When's the last time you did nothing, got out into nature, recharged, spent some time with friends and family just connecting? And they're like, what do you mean? I can't do that. It's like, well, why not? Well, because I got to work really hard so that I can earn enough money. So when I'm 70 years old, I can retire and actually enjoy my life. It's like, well, how's that working out for you? It's like such a bullshit myth we're sold, right? Instead, it's like, well, what would it mean to actually start doing that stuff now
Yeah.
while your
Like
body
the
still can?
and what you're teaching these men and what you're doing with your work groups is so important because, yeah, I mean, mentally burnt out, emotionally burnt out, physically burnt out, many times financially burnt out, no matter how hard you work, you
Yep.
just can't catch up. And it's like what Tony Robbins said one time. I've said this a million times. He does those retreats in Fiji, about that island Fiji, and these people come there, they spend $15,000, they fucking firewalk, they're on fire, they go, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna kill it, I'm gonna make all this money, then I'm gonna come back and get a condo here and relax. And they're like, dude,
Mhm.
why? Why don't you just stay here
Yeah.
now? I mean, why are you going to go do all that shit, kill yourself to come back when you're stay
Yeah.
here? And it's like, and that's what we do. It's like, why do we think we have to do that? And why do we think we have to be a certain way? And why do we not just drop this facade of, well, this is what we have to be? And I love what you're doing with these groups because when dude, like, it's like I'm really close with my two sons. One of them is my business partner in our real estate company, and the other one is in the Air Force, right? And
Yeah.
they bring it, man. They have no problem calling dad shit. No problem, right? They're just like,
That's
Dad,
great.
no way. Or, they'll just call me out. You're being a puss, dude. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, well, what you just said is bullshit. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm your dad, all right? It's just, but they're men. I mean, I'm really
Mhm.
proud that, their mom did a great job. They're men, and I look at a lot of their friends, and I'm like, ooh, wow, this generation's in trouble, man. This
Yeah.
generation's. trouble. They don't want to drive. You know, they're 30 years old. They don't want to get their driver's license. They don't want to work. They don't want to get out of the house. They look like shit. They're eating shit. I'm like, so I mean, at what age do you see most of your people? I mean, at what age are you working with most of your people?
I work with the whole span. I work with guys up into their 70s, and I've worked with guys as young as in their 20s. There are men who specialize in working with guys younger than that. And there is thankfully a kind of blossoming, what we call rite of passage movement. That's about getting young boys, 10 to 15, out into the wild with other men, often with their fathers when possible, to start this kind of process in a far more conscious way. Because I would say my experience of particularly younger guys I've worked with who are, maybe more of what I'd broadly categorize as that kind of failure to launch, like, just kind of stuck at home, a little afraid. Often what they've never had is a strong masculine presence giving them guidance in life. Just it. And, what I teach men is, the father energy we all need is let's figure it out together. Oh, you tried that and it didn't work? It's okay, man. Let's figure it out. What can we do different next time? Oh, you're scared about that? Yeah, that's okay. Let's make a plan. Let's figure it out. There's this sense of you can try shit because someone's behind you to help guide you and help you recover if you, mess up or fall. I grew up without that kind of presence. So my life early on was like this, afraid to do anything because I'm terrified. And so I would have to like be super calculating, make sure I could do it totally perfectly, and then like take a little step. And it was exhausting. And it didn't work very well because then I kind of stumbled through life as well until I kind of found men's work and older mentors and whatnot. In just what I see, again, a men's group can start to do this for some guys is, oh shit, there's someone behind me now. And I don't have to figure it out all by myself. And in fact, we can learn to actually celebrate. Don't do it perfect. Just launch, get some data, come back, regroup. We'll make a plan with you. You try it again. And as we can trust that process, whether that's with a mentor, a father figure, men's groups, or peers, men start to take more action in their lives because they're like, oh, okay, it's okay if I do it wrong. It's okay if I ask that girl out and she doesn't like me back, right? But when we don't have anything to fall back to, it's terrifying. At least it was for me. And so I think a lot of these kind of failure to launch kids, they just haven't been around strong, masculine, and this is the really important piece, present men, meaning I'm actually here with you right now. I'm not just sitting on the TV watching sports. I'm involved and I'm asking you about your life. What do you want to do? What are you curious about? What are you scared about? Hey, let's go out camping. Like, let's try some things. I want to teach you some things. I want to learn some things from you. And there's been a huge lack of that for so many of the younger guys I work with. And, I'm not here to blame the reasons for that. It's just the reality of that. But when that starts to get connected and online, and literally for a lot of men, it's just this feeling of there's somebody at my back. There's somebody at my back. Boldness comes back online. Okay, I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to go out to this group. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to sign up for this workshop. I'm going to go for this job, whatever that might be. And we need a lot more of it. That's for sure.
So what is you've got? I went to your website. You've got a ton of great stuff on there. I mean, so some dude comes to you and he's got his tail between his legs, he's got his head down a little bit. 'Cause, no one wants to ask for help, right? Especially dudes, and no one wants to just say, "Hey, I fucked up." You know, I need some help. I need some love. I need some what? What are on some of your programs? What's the first thing you'd lead them to? I mean, what would you go, dude? We need. I think a good start for you would be this.
Yeah, a lot of times it'd be, getting involved in a men's group, whether it's one I'm leading or not. Like, just, yeah, spend some time with other men, see what it feels like. For a lot of guys, particularly, there's probably 40 to 50% of guys I've worked with, it's deeply uncomfortable to be around other men because they used to be bullied or beat up. Like, it used to actually be a life and death thing, or the primary masculine figure in their life, a stepdad, a father, whatever that, used to actually abuse them and hurt them. So there's a distrust. And so the first step is like to get into a space and learn, okay, that's not all men. That's not all men. it can be safe. So getting involved in a group is really good. A lot of guys, honestly, come to me through podcasts. There's just something too that kind of I get to listen, get to know someone, I can feel their energy, and then okay, I want to engage because I feel like I kind of know that person. Just guys love podcasts. That's something I've learned. It's just love listening to podcasts. It's a great gateway. And then the honest truth is, most men that I work with really only come to me when they've actually hit a crisis in their life. Some men are proactive for sure, but it's not many of them. So a lot of guys I work with come in and work with me in one of my programs that's specifically around dating and relationships. And it's one of the places I specialize in because lo and behold, it is one of the only things I often find that is so painful for a man, he'll get off his ass and try something new. My wife is leaving me. I've gone on 100 first dates in 2 years and nobody calls me back. Like there's just, I want to be in a loving relationship and I'm not able to create that right now, or the one I'm in is ending. And there's like a visceral pain, and they come and get help in those moments. Other people, it's, yeah, like burnout or depression, or just, I feel so stuck and so lost. I don't know what to do. So they'll come. And so, yeah, I funnel people into, listening to some podcasts, coming to some groups. Live retreats are always great. It's kind of like diving into the deep end, frankly, because it's, you're in a physical room with other men that can be activating for a lot of guys, but it's also generally the highest payoff in terms of actually getting physical time spent with other men and your nervous system literally starting to rewire. And that's where I really see men, come back alive and just start getting connected. So, it really depends on the man. So, the first thing I'll do with a guy is just talk to him. What's going on in your life? What's not working? What do you want? And then based on that, we'll kind of guide him. Sometimes it's to work with me, frankly. Sometimes it's to work with other people. Many, many men, for whatever reason, and I don't blame them. They're often more likely to reach out to a coach first. And then, I would say, half the guys I end up working with long time, I get them kind of cross training with some therapy and counseling as well. That, like, oh yeah, no, there's nothing to be ashamed of. We go to the gym to work out our body. We go to a therapist to work out our heart and our mind. That's it. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing broken with you. It's just hygiene for the spirit. For some reason, guys, there's so much judgment around that in the culture. But they'll come to coaches first. So I'll often start with guys, and then we'll parallel path that sometimes. I'll do one-on-one work with guys. I lead men's groups, retreats. There's definitely a lot of avenues. But usually what it is, frankly, who comes to me, they're in a great moment of pain and they've listened to a podcast and they've heard me say something that just deeply resonated with their experience. And they're like, you said that? And I was like, yeah, that's true. So I want to work with you. Whatever reason.
Uh, you know, Crying is such an awesome thing, and I don't, I would imagine that in some of the retreats where you're with people and that vibration's pumping. I know that Jim and I, when we were doing our grief pie, we would snivel and cry through so much of it. And one episode we did, we called it, the day they died, and we recounted,
Mm,
like Jim and I just both,
wow.
for good fortune, were with our wives when they died. And so, I mean, recounting those last moments with, Jim had been with Jen for 30 years. I'd been with April for 28 years.
Wow.
And we just fucking cried like baby. And people were like, dude, don't ever make me watch that fucking episode again. I swear to God, I hate you. You go fuck yourself. And I'm like, that wasn't the reaction I was looking for, but yeah, whatever. But because raw emotion is really hard for people. Yet there's nothing, like I tell people all the time, what happens if you have a really hard cry? You start to laugh. It's just a weird thing that your body
Totally.
does. You cry your fucking eyes out. You sit and weep, and all of a sudden you start crying, and you have no idea what. I mean, you start laughing. You have no idea why you're laughing, but it's just you've cleansed your body of that hurt, that ache, that
Yep.
whatever it is. So when you're in these groups, I would imagine there's some real emotion going on. There's some real truth flying out of there.
Yeah, whether it's through doing deep shadow work with guys, doing breath work. I mean, men wail, they release, they they let go. Their bodies shake sometimes, and they come out the other side. Guess what? They feel better. They feel more alive. They feel more spacious. And most men, a lot of men I know are terrified of feeling grief because they fear that it's going to last forever. Just, oh my God, there's so much in there. It'll just take me down. The raw, honest truth I've seen in doing this work for many years is most emotional content, when you go right towards it and you just be with it, we're talking minutes. Doesn't mean there's not waves. So I often, think of
Oh
sets of
yeah.
waves in the ocean, like, okay, a big set's coming in and then it calms down. That can happen over days, weeks, months, and years for sure. But the really intense part, if you really go into it and you're in a safe environment and you're connected to people, lo and behold, often minutes. And men will often, I've had this experience, and men I've often worked with, they're like, oh, fuck, I've been holding that for 25 years. And that took 7 minutes, 7 minutes of my life. And so, a lot of guys, I'll be like, just like productivity wise, it makes a lot more sense to feel like we're supposed to cry to feel better. It actually does release things in your body so that you can move on. If you're not crying, you're not grieving, you're not moving on. You're still holding that inside your system. And anytime we're holding anything emotionally inside our system, it takes metabolic resource. This is what saps energy from men. And we start to really see it in our 30s and 40s and 50s and beyond. Of why am I so exhausted all the time? Oftentimes it's because we're holding so much. They say your issues are in your tissues, and it's true. And so every time I do this work with men and they have a big rage or grief or whatever, why I say we get to see them come back alive is because suddenly energy starts flowing again. All that energy that was locked up in holding that is free to be used for life again, to actually be back in our life in this moment. And um, tears are certainly one of my favorite ones to support men in, of just like, yeah, man, just let it come. Let it come. Let it roll. Your body knows exactly what to do. And many men actually do end up coming to me. And what they say, Gary, is, I wish I could cry. I do get men coming to me. I wish I could cry. I just can't. Lo and behold, we get them in a room, loving, present men connected to them, often just a hand on the shoulder, boom, avalanche. We're not supposed to do this shit alone. We are supposed to be seen and be connected in the process.
Yeah. And that's why they call it disease. We got a disease because it's dis-ease. Our body is just not
Exactly.
at ease. Our soul is not at ease. Our soul is hurting, man. And there's not a lot of ways to heal your soul unless you're just willing to open your soul, and
Yeah.
keeping it closed up like that does not do us any good, brother. So what you're doing is awesome. I love your work, Jason. I appreciate what you're doing, and men definitely need the support. It's not weird. It's not stupid. It's not feminine. It can be feminine. Who gives a shit? It could be feminine. It's masculine,
It's
whatever it is,
human.
but it's necessary. What you're
Yeah.
doing is necessary. So I do always ask one last question before I set my poor guest free here. Probably itching to get out of here, but I always ask one last question, if I may. Um, I always ask the what if you could question ahead of time, and I tell you I'm going to ask that, but this one I don't say it. But if there's something that was important to Jason Lang, it could be a sentence, it could be a thought, it could be a philosophy, it could be something you heard from someone, or it could be whatever. It could be a cookie recipe. Who gives a shit? But if there's something you wanted to leave our guests with that really means something to you that you'd like to take away, what would that one thought be?
Yeah. I think what I'm going to land on here is this idea that we kind of just went into it, but some things aren't meant to be felt alone. Some feelings that they're not meant to be felt alone. And we have our whole nervous systems as human beings are literally oriented to be relational, right? The got that big bundle of nerves that goes from the base of our brain all the way down our spine, the vagal nerve, and it's all about connection. It's all about relating us to connection, which means eye contact, facial expression, voice. And it is one of the primary tools we use to regulate our nervous systems. So we are meant to co regulate each other. And as we've uh, gotten out of connection with each other, people are less regulated. So everyone's walking around so uncomfortable and anxious and angry. And then we turn to social media to feel better. And then we see something that makes us pissed off and it makes it worse. And so, just this idea, whether it's a men's group, a support group, a church group, whatever, especially with the way things are going with AI and virtual reality, getting your physical body in front of other human beings in the real world offline is going to be so important for wellness moving forward that what I tell my guys is, in my case, getting into a men's group, it doesn't make life easier, but it does make it a hell of a lot better. All that stress is going to come at you no matter what. You're going to be a lot more resourced to deal with it. That simple. So you can recover faster and keep moving forward in your life to create what you want.
I love it, brother. Don't do it alone, man. Don't do it alone. All right, well, guys, that was Jason Lange. Jason, you're awesome. Where can we find you and where can we chase you down so we can all get healed, all of us dudes?
Yeah, you can check out me and everything I'm up to at evolutionary.men. So not .com, but .men. I got a podcast on there. I got writings, my programs. You can also just reach out, throw me an email in my contact form if you want help finding a men's group or just, hey, where do I get started? I have some things, but I'm just as likely to push you to someone else I know if I got something in your area or something else going on. So don't be a stranger.
Awesome. And we'll post all that on the website, all the links to your stuff and how to find you and things like that. So, really, man, I appreciate it. It's great work. It means so much. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to our brothers and sisters because it helps everybody. A healthy man is a healthy society. And I think it's crucial, brother. So, everybody, you were just exposed to the amazing Jason Lange on this episode of the What If You Could podcast. Look for Jason Lange. I'll put the links there. And please reach out. Man, don't do this shit alone. It sucks. Get out there and get help. All right, my brother. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gary.
All right, man. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.